over there, one of which is a collection of quotes on Lincoln. I'm a Lincoln guy. I caught the Lincoln virus early in my life from moving to Central Illinois. And so there's a lot of quotes, a few from Lincoln, but what's more interesting to me are quotes about Lincoln from people who knew him personally. And it gives you insight to who this person is. And so you're welcome to take one of those. And if you find some great ones, add it to that list and send them to me or whatever. We'll laugh about it and talk about it. So I want to do a couple things tonight. First of all, I want to thank some people. Then I want to talk about three things that I was in business 44 years, so I had to learn something, right? So I've got three things I'm going to pass on. And then I've got some stories that I want to talk about real quick. Two of them are kind of work related, but they're not about work. And then I've got one about how I got involved in my community. And then the last one is how did I get involved in the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum Project. And so it's kind of an interesting little story. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. And then we head for coffee and dessert. We'll close so that you can go home to your family. So I'm here all day tomorrow. I'm in a parade at 2, but other than that, I'm available. Call me and have breakfast or lunch or dinner, whatever. Call me, and I'll probably sit in my room, waiting for my brother to invite me. So let me tell you real quick the kind of the history of how we got here. In 1966, when I was 11, hard to believe that this old gray guy was 11, my family moved here to Washington. And my dad was a postal inspector, U.S. postal inspector. So he was a gun-carrying Fed. All right? So there was law and order in my house. I just want to and so we had moved from Arkansas to northern Wisconsin to central Illinois. And they ended up buying a house, in Rolling Meadows North. And so that's how we ended up here. Now, here's kind of the interesting thing, because I can kind of get along with anybody, and here's probably why. During those years, I went to 7 public schools, okay, in 4 towns and in 4 states. And we lived in 6 different houses, some rentals, some are family owned. And so a work transfer really brought us here, and that's how we got here. And then I lived in the same house for 7 years. Now that, to you, may not be a big deal. For me, it was unbelievable. And Mike had to split his high school. My younger brothers ended up splitting their high school. But I was here in the sweet spot. So I got to go 6th grade to 12th grade in one community. So that's why this is, I adopt this as my home community. Because those are really your formative years. When you're a kid, you're playing, and when you're older, you go to college, and you're worried about, making money and stuff like that. I got to play around here. It was great. When we moved to Washington, I went to 3 different schools when we moved here. So I went to John L. Hinsey 1 year. I went to Beverly Manor for 2 years, and then, of course, I went to high school. So even here, I had 3 different groups that we were kind of getting to know and kind of run with. And so, but it really was the right place, right time for me. Maybe not so much my brothers. Maybe, they didn't have the same experience I did, but I love it. As far as thanking people, a couple people I want to talk about. First of all, I'm married. She couldn't come tonight, but my wife is, and I've been married for 46 years. Okay, so it seems to be working out. We're still, once I retired, there was an adjustment period for her, but other than, but she's really, when we got married, we were so young that my dad had to sign. Okay, I wasn't even 21, and she was, I don't know, must have been 19 maybe. And, all my friends are going, what are you doing? And they're all on multiple relationships. And somehow it worked for us. Okay, so kind of a cool thing. We have 2 kids, and one lives in St. Louis, and one my son and daughter-in-law live in Florida. No grandkids yet. So I've been really lucky you know, in this part of my life, and over here, I don't have grandkids. It's the only reason I had kids. So, you know, so I'm pressing. You know, and I didn't have to, our house was kind of, you know, I had four brothers, two great parents. I didn't have to look for a lot of role models. I had some right in my own house. My dad was a role model, and he was very curious, loved history. And so that's where I got some of my interest. My brother Mike was my older brother, and he tells everybody he's my younger brother, but he's not. He's a lot older than me, 5 years. And that's almost a generation. Um, and he was everything I wanted to be. He was a good athlete. He was a good student. Now, I got the award, but nobody go look at GPAs or where I finished in my class or anything like that, okay? Because I had a great time. And we'll just leave it at that. So anyway, even in my family, we have great athletes, we have great students. In my family, if I looked at how successful I was as a student, I'm probably sixth in my own family. So you wonder, how did this guy make it? Well, I sort of did, and I figured it out. And on sports, I know I was fourth or fifth best. And here's the fun part: my varsity jacket is downstairs in my, and this guy's 10 times better than I was, and I don't care. I'm gonna take a picture of me in front of my jacket downstairs. The 73 and everything on it. That's great. So, you know, I need to thank Mike and Merle. Merle Schmidt is in the class of 73 with me. They submitted me for this, and I really appreciate it. Merle and I are on our 50th reunion committee. Next year is our 50th high school reunion. And I am pleased to tell you that we have no responsibilities. That's the most important thing, right? Exactly. We go to the planning sessions, we give our input, we eat, and then we leave. And so you know how it works. All the girls are running everything. So it's great. They didn't want our input anyway, so yeah. Um, and I want to kind of reach back to somebody who was the president of the Historical Society a few years ago, and that's Toni Minton. I called her back in 2018 before COVID. And I said, look, you know, I'm from Washington and I do a lot of Lincoln stuff and, you know, I've been involved with the library and I actually own a Lincoln document. And so if you guys want me to do, if I can help some way, let me know. And so if you came to the ice cream social in 2018, I brought my Lincoln document and sat in a room and explained to people, you know, how I got it and why I got it and all that kind of stuff. And then I spoke at St. Mark's, and I talked about Frederick Douglass and Lincoln. And a lot of people are familiar with Douglass and Lincoln, but they're not familiar with Frederick Douglass and Lincoln. And so I brought that story up, and I still tell that story quite a bit. And that's one of the reasons I own a Lincoln document is because it opens doors. And so that conversation I had with Toni, we went to the blend, and you know I bought her coffee. And, you know, and then she said, well, why don't you do this? And I said, oh, that's great. But what that did was it kind of put me in the path of opportunity to be considered for this because I got to come home. I got to talk to somebody in the History Society. I got to talk to people who are history nerds like me. And I'm not saying you're a nerd, but I'm a history nerd. And it kind of put me in a path to even be considered. And so it was important and I enjoyed it. Um, you know, I have a lot of teammates and people I went to school with that I want to thank, and I don't have to name names, but you know, just a great town full of great people. And you know, my memories here are all positive. I don't have any negative memories of Washington, and so that's pretty rare, and I think it's remarkable. Um, I want to mention three people who I consider inspirational people to me from Washington when I was in school. And these names, you know, some of you may know or not, but Brian Wisher was one of them. Dean Zimmerman was one of them, and Jerry Essington. Because I can remember those guys having a conversation with me like I was an adult. And most of the time, you know, coaches barked at you, right? And teachers kind of were firm with, those guys really were great. And so I just wanted to bring them up because they're part of your history too. And they were kind. They showed interest in what you were doing, and they encouraged you, and that's pretty remarkable, and that's what we all need. Um, and then the last group I want to, this is probably crossing one of those red lines I'm not supposed to cross, but I'm Irish, so I'm jumping across, right? So, I grew up in Rolling Meadows North, which was not really Washington, right? That's the east end of town. Is that the right direction? No, west end of town. Okay. And I didn't have my navigation yet. So all those kids that live down there in District 50 love Washington too. And back then, the Washington kids kind of hung together, and then, once we got sports, we kind of mixed and all that. But, this is one for District 50, because, and I know some of the people in town grew up there and live up in town now, but, we kind of had a subculture down there. It was fun. I played all my games at Oliver Thomas, down there and stuff like that. And I would just share a picture I had, of your cousin, right? So, first cousin. So anyway, let me talk a little bit about work. Um, the best thing to say about my career is that it was unplanned, and fate was kind to me. And you can say, well, you did a good job and all this kind of stuff. Well, I know a lot of people did a great job. Didn't have as good a run as I did. And so I worked for two great companies. One was Monsanto Company, doesn't exist anymore. It's been bought and hacked up into a bunch of different pieces. And then one was Nestle Purina, was Ralston Purina. And so I really had a great run with both of those, certainly with the second one. And Purina was, it was a Midwest company. It's a feed company. So if you see the checkerboard on mills and stuff all around these little towns, that's Purina. That's who they are. They're really small town, love farmers kind of a company. And they, ended up selling off the feed business back, in the 80s. And they started this pet food business, making it bigger and bigger and bigger. And so eventually we were bought by Nestle. And that's part of one of the stories I want to tell. But the culture was a small town culture. And the values of a company, and you go, well, companies play values. They really have. And so the founder of the company was a guy named William Danforth. I don't know if he's related to the people that own this bank or not, because he came from Missouri, but you never know, who's related to who. But he had what he called four values, and they passed on and still in Purina now. And one is called Stand Tall, which is basically live your life with integrity. One is Smile Tall, have passion for people and for life. Think tall, and that's develop your expertise and your skills. When you get in your core, business mode or your job mode, you've got to be competent. And so you really have to hone those skills. And then live tall is the one that is kind of remarkable to me. And that's, his philosophy was you bring your best self to work, but that doesn't mean you don't bring your best self home. He was very big on, taking that service into your personal life and into your service life. And so he encouraged that, and the company still encourages that kind of thing. And so it just, fate, luck, serendipity, whatever you want to call it. I had a pretty good business career, and it was because I was with a company that kind of aligned with my values, and they gave me some freedom to do some stuff. When you have a little bit of success, that opens doors for you. And so I've served on a lot of boards and things like that. I like to get things done. Didn't require a lot of sleep in my 30s and 40s and 50s, and now I do. So I'll just say that. But I learned three things, so I want to talk real quick about them. One is you got to put yourself in the path of opportunity. In a way, I sort of did that with the Roots Award. I didn't know there was a Roots Award. Tony didn't even tell me there was a Roots Award. But I did, right? And it wasn't a strategy, it just happened. But, we grow up in this kind of humble Midwest place that says, just kind of just do your job, and the cream will rise to the top. Well, guess what? The cream will sour before you ever get to the top. Okay. Another one is, good things come to those who wait. And these aren't bad things. It's just what you grow up hearing, right? Good things, come to those who wait. And what I would say, if you wait long enough, you'll watch people just pass you on the promotion chart, right? So I had a good mentor back about mid-career who told me, look, I just want to tell you something. He said, everybody is in sales. You're selling yourself every day. So everybody's in sales. Because we all compartmentalize. Well, I don't do this, I don't do that. We're all in sales. Everybody in this room is in sales. Second thing he said is, everyone in business is busy. They don't have time for you. You gotta learn your own way. You gotta go past them, right? And then the other thing he said is, your career is your responsibility. You think you do a good job and you just, sit at your desk and do all this stuff, you're just gonna zoom up to the top. And that's the way I always thought, and what I found out is just the opposite of that. You put yourself in the path of opportunity. And so that's kind of what I got to do. Another thing I learned in companies is you never take a boss your problems. Okay? And I got the opportunity to be a boss later. And so if somebody brought me a problem, I'd solve it. I had no problem solving problems. They may not like the answer I gave. What I thought, and I kind of mentor and coach young people and people in the workplace. And one of the things I really talk to them is bring your boss solutions. That's how you add value to a company. That's how you add value to an organization. You can always bring problems. There are always people who will bring you problems, and they'll set them on your desk, and they'll even tie them a little bow around them and say, here you go, you can have all these problems. And that's not the people I promoted, right? And it's not the people in the organization really helping move forward. It's really the people who are willing to get out there and say, look, here's an issue, here's how I'd like to handle it, here's two options, what do you think, boss? And as a boss, I love that, right? And and I would tell people, go back to your office and think about this and bring it back to me. And they go, well, no, I think it's, and I go, okay, then you go to your desk and I'm going to solve your problem. You just aren't going to like the solution, right? So that's one thing I learned along the way. And then the third thing is, and it's hard for all of us to kind of comprehend this idea of find a coach, but you really need to find a coach in life. You need to find it in business. Like you're in a lane in business and you're trying to figure it out. Find the most successful person in your business and go talk to them and ask them if they'll be your coach. I was on a fire and police commission, secretary of the board and all that stuff, and we would hire and promote police officers. Okay, so it was kind of an area I'd never really been involved in. And we hire these young people, and then we send them to the police academy. And then they get out of the police academy, right? They've got a certificate, and so now they're ready. Well, they're not ready. So we put them for 6 months with an officer that coaches them, right? Nitpicks them, watches them, observes them, and about 3 months into it, they'd come see me and they'd say, I'm tired of this. I'm ready. I'm ready for this. And my answer to them was always something like this. Wayne Gretzky? He was the greatest hockey player. He had a coach his whole career. Walter Payton? Greatest running back in history. Had a coach his whole career. Get over yourself. Find yourself a coach. And so that's one of the things I tell people. The last one is this. You really have to make things happen in an organization, in your family, in your life, and be active to be successful. You just have to. And so there's an interesting proverb, and it's called Newburn's Law in business, and we talk about it a lot. And it's really about having 3 different types of people in the world. So some of you probably heard this one, but I'll tell it to you. First one is, there are those people who make things happen. Then the second one is, there are people who watch things happen. And the third is, there's people who wonder what happened. They got completely left out, right? And so you want to be the person that makes things happen. So I've got to tell a couple stories real quick, and one of them's about business, and I'm telling it on myself because here's this great vice president of Purina, and guess what? I can be a fool. And so this is an opportunity of that. Nestle Purina is a pet care company, so we take care of dogs and cats and sell people treats, and you overpay for them. And appreciate that. And so we have business reviews every quarter, big company, right? So we go to the headquarters is downtown St. Louis. You go across the street to St. Raymond's Church, and we call them the church meetings. So we'd have our quarterly meeting, and what goes on a quarterly meeting? Presentations, PowerPoint you to death. You're lucky if you get a few commercials and things, show happy dogs and stuff. You get to do that. And then you get to the numbers, and they tell you what the numbers are for the quarter. And so we have these church meetings. And at the end of these meetings, the lights come up, and the CEO says something like this. Does anybody have any questions? And what that really means is, we're done, but if you're bold enough or crazy enough to ask a question, I'll answer it, right? So it's a courtesy. Well, we had one of those days, and a woman that I knew real well got up and went to an aisle microphone. I'm thinking, what's going on? She worked in my department, great person, great employee. And she said, I've got a question. We're a pet care company. Why can't we bring our pets to work with us? Okay, that's a bold statement, And so I'm the facility guy, so you can imagine the horror. It just went through my head. I took care of 37 different buildings at Purina in North America. And at the headquarters, there's 16 buildings. There's 3,000 people. There's a daycare. There's food services. There's all these things, elevators, all this stuff. So as this facility guy, I immediately said, this is like the worst nightmare a guy can have. And not only that, Nestle owns us, and I'm the safety and environmental guy, so I'm thinking, oh gosh, I'm going to get audited over everything. And so in about 5 seconds, I decided this is really a bad idea. So I'm leaning against the back wall, and I'm pretty confident at that point my boss, who's the CEO, is going to say something like this. This is a great question, but it's a complex issue. Right? So we're going to review it, and then we'll look about it and figure it out. And if it's the best thing for the business and for the associates, we'll consider it. And I was like, that's what you ought to say, Pat. Just say that. Instead, and what that really is you can form a committee, right, to do this, and you kill it. Kill the idea. You study it to death, people get annoyed, and then you give up and you kill it with a committee. And that's what I thought he was going to do. And my boss says, and there's this long pause, and I'm sitting in the back, and I'm going, say it. Say exactly what I just thought. And he says, I think it's a good idea. And he said, I'd like to bring my dog to work. Really? Bring somebody to bring your dog to work. And he says, I think we're going to talk about this and get it done. And I'm the guy who has to get this done. So I'm in the back. I vaguely remember going back to my office, crossing the street. Probably didn't look both ways or anything. And I went in, and I never shut the door to my office until I was doing performance reviews. I shut the door to my office, and I sat in my chair, and I put my head in my, I just what my life just ended. So I knew I had 3 choices. First, I could quit and move my family, and maybe go out west and be a rancher, park ranger, or something like that, or I could just stay and try and pursue. Let my boss know that he just made the wrong decision. So have a meeting, with just Pat and I and talk about that. And then after you're done with the pity party, you go, okay, all right, that's great. Now, how do I get this done? And so I called a couple people, and I called a veterinarian that's on our staff, and PR, HR, the one legal person I could get along with. And we got it done. And we got it done by making it a privilege. It's not a right. You want to bring your pet? It's a privilege. You take care of your pet. You have your vaccination records. We had all this stuff. And so we kind of created a guidebook, etiquette book for employees. And the premise here is that there's no bad pets. There's just bad owners. And so that's how we approached it, right? And so let me just tell you real quick, you know, towards the end of like the last 5 years that I was working, you know, they try to pass information on to the younger people. So they started having me talk to the new employees at their orientations, right? And I always told them the story. And I said, you know, this is the difference between management and leadership, you know? And I was in management mode, full mode, all the reasons I couldn't get something done. And my boss was in the opposite. He's looking at this thing as, you know, we can do this. It'll make us better. And that's what happened. And so in 2014, obviously we implemented it. Had probably 100, 150 dogs every day in our workplace. Okay, and yes, we had accidents, and we had a great accident team clean up on aisle 17. And but you know what? All the things I thought were going to go wrong didn't, and the things that I never thought about, they changed. Right, made us better, brought us closer to our customers. And so in 2014, Nestle Purina Associates broke the Guinness World Record for most pets in an office on one day. Anybody want to take a shot on how many? 281. 281. That's a lot. And we did have some messes. So I want to tell a story, another story here. And this one really is about kind of 6 degrees of separation. We're all connected. Like I found out, you know, Ron's connected to somebody that I knew and played baseball with long, 50 years ago. And so if you talk to somebody long enough, it kind of comes together. And this one's really Nestle Purina in St. Louis and Nestle in Switzerland, and then this Midwest, Central Illinois area, and it has a Washington connection. Okay, so let me just tell you real quick. We got bought by Nestle, world's largest food company, and things could have gone horribly wrong. Their headquarters was in Glendale, California. Ours is in St. Louis. They own Friskies, you know, the Friskies brands. We owned, you know, the Purina brands. And so one decision could have changed the lives for 3,000 people, just like that. And fortunately, it didn't happen that way. Fate was kind to us again. And what Nestle did was basically take our CFO and retire him and bring their CFO in. Because if the Swiss can do one thing, it's count money. And they want the guy counting money to be their guy. And so they brought him in, and we struggled for about 5 years with him. We were still doing really well, but he got promoted, which we all had a party. The CFO got promoted, went back to Switzerland, we were all happy. And my boss called me and he goes, hey, you know, we've done really good, and so they want me to pick the next CFO that I want from the CFOs. And so we got this guy, and he said, I want you to call him and connect with him, and you'll be kind of his Purina contact and get him relocated here. And so I did that. And so I called this guy named Rock Foster, and I introduced myself, and I said, he said something I have never heard another Nestle executive say, ever. Okay? And he said, don't really need anything. I went, really? You don't really need anything? So I thought a minute. He said, no, I grew up in Central Illinois. My mom still lives there. And he said, I went to Illinois State. I worked in public accounting. I went to Baxter in Chicago. Then I joined Nestle. And I'm looking forward to coming back home. I went, whoa, where's home? First question, right? And he said, well, I grew up in a small town near Peoria. That's what I said for years and years. If I said I grew up in Washington, you know what they'd say? Oh, you mean Washington, D.C.? That's the first question, right? And then I would say, no, it's close to Peoria. So, you know, so then I started saying, I grew up in a small town by Peoria. And I said, so where did you grow up? And he said, I grew up in Morton, Illinois. And he said, my mom still lives there in the house we were raised in. And I said, oh, so you're a Potter. There's this pause, and he goes, how did you know that? Right? And so I said, well, I'm from Washington, and I'm a Panther. And he goes, 8 miles away. So, and he says, well, you're from Washington. You probably played football for my Uncle Don, and it's Don Kleber. Now, how weird is this? This is the CFO of Purina, right? And I said, no, my brother played for him. I played, unfortunately Don left, and I had another guy. I won't talk about that. And we started talking about each other, right? And we had this kind of connection. And it turns out that he was 2 years behind me. So my senior year, his sophomore year, he started. He was a great football player, played at Illinois State, ran track, really great athlete. And so he and I dressed out at the same game, my senior year at Morton. And Merle found the program. I don't know where he found the program, but Merle found the program. And it had both of our names in it for that game. And so I shared that with him. And so, he moved in and kind of, we had an executive welcome session for him. And here's what he said. He said, we were at Washington University having kind of an executive welcome event. And he said, here's how he introduced himself. He said, I'm glad to be at Purina. I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Morton. I went to Illinois State, where I met my wife. I worked in public accounting and finance at Baxter in Chicago. And I'm probably the only person in this room who played football against Gene McCoskey. 100 people go, he played football. So anyway, those connections are pretty remarkable. Now I want to tell you one other story, and I can tell you how I got involved in my community and stuff, but I'll skip that one and I'll talk about how I got involved with the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum, because it was putting myself in the path of opportunity. And when I get the door cracked open, I stick my foot in, and then I stick my leg in, and then I kind of, so I'm pretty good at that. And so let me tell you real quick how it happened. Basically, I was a Lincoln, got the Lincoln virus young, and I kind of carried that with me and read a lot of books and things like that. And so I'm reading the paper in St. Louis around 1999 maybe, and there's an article about HOK Architectural Company, and they have gotten the design, contract for the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. Well, it did some work for me. I'm an architect, so I called him. And I said, hey, David, I need a favor. He goes, sure, whatever you need. And I said, I want to talk to Guy Obata, your head architect, one of the world's greatest architects, about the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. And he goes, well, he really doesn't talk to people much. And I said, well, it's going to be a challenge for you. I got nothing to lose. Dave's career might be, a little shaky, but not mine. And so I said, well, just tell him a Purina guy wants to, know about it, and I just need 30 minutes if he'll just show me what's going on. So I have zero chance of this ever happening, right? And what ends up happening is he says yes. So I go over to Guy's conference room. He's, the arch is in the background. I mean, it's a big office building downtown. And he's a very formal Asian man and great architect, just passed away recently. And he said, I came in the room and it's just me and him. And he says, he turns around, he's got all the storyboards here. And I go, well, this ain't right. Okay. So I sat there for a little bit, and he's talking about the design and stuff. So he turns around, I kind of creep up on him. And I go, can I ask you about this and this? And he goes, you sit here. You sit. And after about the third time, he sort of got that that's not what I wanted. And I looked at him and I said, can we have a conversation about this? And it was awkward. More for him than me, because I got nothing to lose. So I'm kind of sitting and he kind of looks at me and he goes, yes, we can have a conversation. And so all of a sudden the conversation went from being talked at to being included in. Okay? And so so he gave me 30 minutes. We talked about Lincoln. We talked about Washington and the condition of architecture. The dome wasn't finished on the Capitol, all those things. And as we're talking about it, that's like the pinnacle. That's what I thought. If I talked to Guy about this, I got the inside track. So I go back to my office at Purina, and about an hour later, David Chasen calls me, this guy, and he says, I don't know what happened with you and Guy. And I said, no, we had a great conversation. He goes, well, you must have, because he wants you to go with our design team to Springfield and meet with the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency. And I go, okay. And he wants you to be a consultant, but unpaid. That's actually a good decision on his part, right? So that's how I got involved. Met some amazing people. The curator of the Lincoln collection. I weaseled my way into the vault, and so I needed a credible witness that I actually went in the vault and held the Lincoln thing. So I invited my brother. And Mike got to hold a bunch of stuff too, and it was pretty cool. Although that was the second time, I got to do it the first time without it. But I figured nobody will ever believe this story, and that's why he's here tonight. I just wanted to get back to that. And really, the amazing thing about it is it just um, it kind of opened up a lot of people wanting to talk to me about Lincoln that knew something about it. I mean, really knew something. Tim Townsend, who was running the National Park Service for the Lincoln Home. You know, I mean, I've looked at the plumbing, right, in the Lincoln Home. I mean, that's how crazy it is. And then Kim Bauer, who was a curator of the Lincoln collection, Susan Moberman, who ran the organization and was putting the whole thing together. And I can tell you that it was fate, you know, luck, serendipity, what you want to call it. Because I still can't believe I got to do it. And so that one conversation just really changed that whole thing. And so um, I guess I want to say a couple things as I kind of close tonight. First is, you know, I've had the privilege to live in two of the best towns in the state of Illinois. And believe me, I travel a lot of the state of Illinois, and it's economically depressing. Especially you go down to southern Illinois where the coal mines are all shut down, things like that. And, you know, I know we fuss and fight. I do it in my own community with each other, but I drove around this place and it looks good. People are safe. It's a great community. And there are a lot of towns that would trade places with Washington and with O'Fallon, Illinois. And so, again, fortune was with me. So we're really the lucky ones. So I want to finish tonight with a Lincoln quote. There's a shot. But it has special meaning to me. And for tonight, it kind of brings this whole experience of the Root Award and all that kind of stuff full circle. And it's a quote by Lincoln in his words, written in the 19th century, so it's man-driven, but that's the way he talks. So I'm going to read this thing. It says, I like to see a man proud of the place in which he lives. And I like to see a man live so that his place will be proud of him. And I kind of feel like that's what happened here. You know, you are decent enough people to reach back to people who only lived here a little bit of time and say you have value and you're part of Washington. And I appreciate it. I'm proud to be from Washington, Illinois. I'm proud of the Roots Award. And it's really special validation for me as a kid who spent his formative years here. So thank you very much. Question?
Thank you again for coming back. That was actually, I have a little tear in my eye. It was pretty inspiring, so thank you for that. And I want to make sure you all watch the parade tomorrow. That's going to be fun. Come back for a walking tour on Saturday. We're walking from 5 to 6 o'clock. We're going to leave from our door downstairs. And we see lots of historical society events. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you.